That seems to work, and I'm going to share my screen again. Are you seeing the sorter, or are you just seeing the play slideshow in a window? Right. That's it. So you got a blank screen now?
No.
How evolution works.
Okay.
Really, probably.
That's interesting. So you're seeing something slightly different from me. Tell me if the screen has changed. Can you see Darwin now?
No.
Okay, then we
David, we're seeing your slideshow all down the left-hand side.
Yep, but you're not seeing the right window that I want to show.
Just
So
how evolution works.
Not quite sure what's going on there. I'm going to play slideshow in a window and stop share and then resume share. This is called teething problems. Blank screen.
Yeah.
And now how evolution works.
Yes.
Okay, good. So we're beginning. Right, lovely. So thank you all for coming. This sounds like a kind of pretentious title, and it's not really meant to be, although it is meant to be cheeky. And you might be expecting that I would be talking a lot about Charles Darwin and the Beagle and the Galapagos Islands and things like that. But truth be told, I'm quite jealous that he got to make a round the world voyage in a lovely, lovely yacht and see wonderful places. And I'm not going to talk about Darwin very much at all. I sort of want to bring it more into a kind of modern focus. And the story starts, so it's a story of discovery. And I certainly wasn't setting out looking for a theory of evolution any more than Charles Darwin was. And about 30 some years ago, I was living in the United States. I was in the States for a decade. And for the last 3 years, I was living at Maharishi International University in Fairfield, Iowa, an enclave of meditators in the middle of the American Rust and Bible Belt. And the big deal about the university was that it was teaching something called consciousness-based education. And most of the people who lived in the community and the students meditated together morning and evening in the 2 golden domes that you can see in the picture top left. And it's a really beautiful place. And I was there from 1986 to 1989 as the group of people meditating reached what Maharishi said would be a critical threshold in which America would find itself without an enemy. So I was sitting in that dome meditating, watching Gorbachev dismantle communism and feeling quite surprised. And then the time came to come back to England, which was just before the Berlin Wall came down. My mum's 80th birthday was deemed the time that I should show up back in the home country. And just before I left, the president of the university returned from meeting Maharishi and said that Maharishi had asked him to switch from teaching consciousness-based education to teaching Vedic science. This is, the Indian wisdom system. And Bevan had asked him, this guy's name was Bevan Morris, Bevan had asked Maharishi, where are we going to find the textbooks? Which is kind of strange because the Vedas are written down. It's all there, it's all written down. So the textbooks already exist. But Maharishi said, you will find the principles of Vedic science in the works of modern authors. And I just sort of remembered that and found it interesting. you know, what does that mean? They won't have been studying Vedic science. So it must be that, you know, their minds are tuning into it in some way. Anyway, I came back to England and I found myself involved with a succession of management gurus. I lucked into some work doing teaching in business. And one of the first person who I was working with was Tom Peters, who's an American author who he and his partner had set out in search of excellence at a time when in the 70s, American businesses had been failing. Japanese were taking over, and in cars and electronics, and it looked like America was really falling apart. And Tom started looking around for signs of renewal. And he found some high-tech companies who were doing things very differently and wrote a book that was really quite scattered. And people said, how are we going to do this? And Tom ended up writing another book, Thriving on Chaos. And he'd sort of brought it all down to a system, which was around creating total custom. This is summed up what he'd been teaching, which is teaching businesses how to be completely involved with their customers, to innovate faster, to empower people, and so on. And I thought, okay, this is quite nice categories. It's talking about people, leadership, innovation, systems, and customers. And the more I thought about it, I thought how neat those categories were. And I couldn't think of any more, and I couldn't think of any way of joining them up. So that looked pretty good to me. And what I was teaching was a course called Creating Value for the Customer. So based on the customer piece, but Tom had got some associates who were teaching a course on leadership. And I thought, well, I should learn more about that. So I went over to America and went on a course with Jim Kouzes and Barry Posner called the Leadership Challenge. And Jim and Barry were saying that there were 5 main leadership behaviors. Leaders challenge the process. A leader challenges the way we do things now. A leader inspires a shared vision. A leader enables others to act. And they've actually got to model the way themselves. They have to be the change they want to see in the world. And they've got to encourage people, or stamp out bad practices and encourage new ones. And I thought, this is really great. I really enjoyed the course. And I thought, oh, they've got 5 things too. Is that a coincidence or what? That's quite fun. So I was looking at these two and thinking, leadership had, Tom's 5 of people, systems, innovation, customers, and leadership had split out into 5 more things, kind of fractally. Why is that? So I just noted that as interesting. And then I found myself working with another teacher called Peter Senge, who'd written a book called The 5th Discipline. And the 5th discipline was systemic thinking. He was saying that if businesses think in a kind of linear way, they go wrong. You've got to think about the whole system. And and that wasn't alone. There were 5 disciplines that people in the business had to take on. Sort of personal mastery. So in a learning organization, people are going to have to be self-disciplined, not shouted at by a sergeant major, but you have to have your own personal discipline. We've got to find ways of learning together as a team. We've got to create our own shared vision, and we need to be able to get these ideas across to ourselves and to other people. And this was Peter Senge's 5th discipline. And I thought that was fascinating too. And he had a really great example of systemic solution, which was the Douglas DC-3 aircraft. And it was the first aircraft to actually be commercially successful. And in fact, it's the most successful aircraft ever. And it relied on 5 innovations coming together. It it wasn't a frame hull like ancient, strung together with frames and with stuff covered over it. It was a tube, like a cigar tube. It had got radial air-cooled engines, more powerful, lighter engines, variable pitch propellers, so it could have plenty of power for takeoff, but it could fly fast as well. And it got a retractable undercarriage, so it didn't have as much drag. And the wing flap, and it had wing flaps. And the reason it had to have wing flaps was because otherwise it would land too fast for most existing runways. It would overshoot, and the wing flaps helped the plane slow down. And I thought, gosh, all these fives all over the place. What's this all about? And I felt I couldn't relate them to each other, and I felt that I needed some kind of a Rosetta Stone. And I remembered a course that Maharishi had taught called The Science of Creative Intelligence, in which he talked about 5 fundamentals of progress, which were stability. Now, apply that to your own body. We have to have some kind of stability. We've got legs, muscles, bones, they get skin holding it all in. There's some stability in our body, but we have to be adaptable as well. We've got hinges, we've got imagination, we've got muscles, and the third quality was purification. Okay, so we take in food, it's not all good for us. So we got our digestion purifies our food. Our immune system throws out foreign bodies, hopefully, and our intellect helps us decide what's good and what isn't. And these are 3 very different qualities. So you also need the quality of integration, holding together the different qualities. We've got nerves and veins and the endocrine system. So we've got systems that are about integration. And finally, all of that put together allows you to grow in this model. And so I thought, okay, can I line this up? Can I use this model to line up some of these qualities that I've seen from Tom Peters and Jim Kouzes and so on? Now, Tom Peters talked about people in an organization. I thought, well, okay, that's your stability. Your people are your core capital. And adaptability, what would that be? Okay, well, leadership, that makes kind of sense. Purification, innovation, yeah, in with the new, out with the old. What holds it all together? The systems in your business, integration, fantastic. So I've only got one left. It had better be about growth. What is it? Customers, great, brilliant, that fits. So that's just kind of eureka moment there. And what about leadership then? Kouzes and Posner are talking about, so what's the stability in an organization? It's the leader modeling the way, right? What's the adaptability? He's challenging the existing system in some way. He's looking for an adaptation. Purification? I'm not so sure about this one, but maybe I don't like their category, but they called encouraging the heart. And it's basically the systems that you have in place to encourage people to do the right thing and stop them doing the wrong things. Integration, what holds it all together, you are inspiring a shared vision. How does a leader grow? He grows by enabling others to act. I thought, this is fantastic. This matches. So, in for a penny, in for a pound. Let's look at Peter Senge and stability, personal mastery. Well, if all the people in your organization are personally stable, that's quite cool. Adaptability, team, I've written team process there. It's actually team learning. So the team's going out and learning together about new things. That's how business adapts. Purification is systemic thinking about things in an integrated way, not just the old linear, systems. And he proves in his book that linear thinking doesn't work. You set up a health service and it ends up patching people up nicely, but it ends up being a bit like a drug delivery system. And you may set up a policing system, but it ends up being a jail system that doesn't rehabilitate. Okay, integration in Peter Senge's model. Everybody having a shared vision that sort of fits in with Kouzes and Posner and Tom Peters in some way. And finally, Peter Senge, growth. Mental models, it's the ideas that we communicate with people. So that was a kind of, I thought I'd reached this kind of epiphany seeing all that. And it doesn't at this moment sort of really relate to evolution at all. So you might reasonably wonder where I'm going with all this. As I did at the time, because I was just playing with this stuff because it was interesting to me. And I got to this point, what on earth is all this about? And what's exciting about this talk is I took my old slides. This is unchanged from 20 years ago when I was developing these ideas, was teaching a course at the University of Middlesex. And I've messed around with the slides overnight and I've no idea what comes next. Oh, right, this is good. I had some questions at this point. One was, what's fundamental about Maharishi's Fundamentals of Progress? You know, it's just another model. Why did it work as a Rosetta Stone? And another one was, Kouzes and Posner are just talking about leadership, which is sort of expanding on Tom Peters on leadership. And I was wondering, is there something that expands on all the others? Is there a course on people? Is there a course on innovation? Is there a system about systems? So I immediately got myself on a sort of wild goose chase or a Easter egg hunt. But this is a little bit about what makes the fundamentals of progress fundamental. And the way that Maharishi teaches it, and Albert Einstein, there's a unified field out of which space-time emerges and energy and the fundamental force fields and matter, right? Subtle and gross. And life includes this. We've got matter, we've got a body, we've got energy fields, we've got a mind, and we connect with spirit. So that's interesting. You know, I mean, I'm just building up a picture here and trying to make sense of it. But John Hagelin, a professor at Maharishi International University, lined up the Western model of nature, which was his N=8 superstring model, which is Higgs fields are matter. And the matter fields are actually subatomic particles. Then you've got forces, gravity, and the unified field, which is based on quantum mechanics. And in the Indian system, you have 5 great elements making up the eightfold Prakriti. And they are, we call them earth, water, fire, air, and space-time. But earth isn't our earth, it's all of matter. And water is actually the subatomic particles. Fire is energy fields, and Vayu is subtle energy, and Akasha is space-time. And then the unified field in the Indian system is Manas, Buddhi, Atman, mind, intellect, and self. So in physics, we don't really understand what the unified field is, but an Indian model of the unified field is something very intimate to ourselves. It's cosmic mind, it's cosmic intellect, and cosmic self. And then I thought, okay, well, earth is stability. Water is adaptability. Water adapts, flows around things. Fire, purification. Air, integration. Space-time growth. So suddenly I've got these 5 qualities, the fundamentals of progress, lined up with how our material universe manifests from consciousness. And you can add to the 5 now: creativity, intelligence, and spirit. So I thought that was pretty cool. Suddenly we've got, suddenly I've got development processes that I'd been coming across of one sort or another. And I was seeing that they had 5 elements, very often steps in this order. And you say, okay, right, well, we're on the surface level and we're trying to cut through to something deeper. So any development process, it kind of makes sense that a development process has to cut through these layers of the cosmic onion, the enchilada, or whatever you want to call it. So, okay, so any evolutionary process is going to be moving from our surface material chaos, trying to get through to what David Bohm called implicate order, from our limitations to a field of pure power, knowledge, and happiness, spirit, omniscient, omnipotent, blissful. And so great, I got this picture. So I carried off on my little Easter egg hunt, and I found a way. I ended up at the World Expo in the year 2000 with a group called Zero Emissions Research and Initiatives. And they had a 5-step process for eliminating waste and doing things more in tune with nature. And at the end of that, a German friend pointed me at something called, all right, and you line these up with the 5 fundamentals of progress. It's sort of like, well, obviously it's going to line up. You know, it's like, what it has to. It's not a good theory if it doesn't. You know, and if it is a good theory, it will be popular because it will strike a chord. And at the end of being at the World Expo, a German friend pointed me at something called appreciative inquiry. Developed by a guy called David Cooperrider and a lady called Diane Whitney. And I persuaded Middlesex University to pay for me to go to America to learn it so that I could come back and teach it. And the steps in this were you pick a topic that you want to study and you inquire into it and you dream up new ideas. You're creating, this is a process for creating a shared vision and implementing it. And again, it lined up with these fundamentals of progress. Now, this is where it gets, where the wheel really hits the road. It also matches Abraham Maslow's further reaches of human nature, the hierarchy of needs, right?
Yeah.
Just flip that over, and survival is about stability. Safety and comfort is, well, once you've got your survival needs taken care of, as long as you're not homeless, you can start to adapt. You can, some of the connections aren't so obvious, but I thought this is how it fits. Esteem needs are where I'm connecting with others more deeply, and being needs are about growth. So we start off with the peak experience, we cut through to, we build our stability from the earth down until we reach consciousness and self-actualization. Great. We're coming up to the half-hour mark. I'm not far from reaching a good point to take a break. But that's evolution of man. What about evolution of mankind? How does that fit? Well, a mate of mine, Pete Russell, wrote this book, The Awakening Earth, which ended up being published in America as The Global Brain. And he had this diagram in the British version, which is missing from the American version. And he didn't have this line in. We started out as hunter-gatherers. That's kind of on the earth, right? And our big step was, and this is percentage of the population, we started becoming agricultural animals. We started growing food, and it was around rivers, right? And we traveled by water. So we kind of shifted from earth to water. The age of industry is about fire, steam, coal. And in Pete's book, he's talking about now we're coming into an information age, right? A mental age. Our use of tools is from just we're in nature to we're adapting to nature to grow our food to we're working with tools that make us powerful, and then we're working with tools of the mind. And the time frames all speeding up. And he's predicting that we're going to be entering a consciousness age, right? Which he called psychotechnology, where instead of having machines outside us working with our information, we're developing our own consciousness. Great. And so stability, adaptability, industry, fire, purification, integration, the information age absolutely fits. Consciousness era growth. Fantastic. And as I said, he'd only got 4 of these in his book. And I actually wrote to him and said, I want to add Earth in to make it up to 5. And he sort of said, be my guest. And by the way, I've just written a book with 5 kinds of God in it. Maybe you can use that too. And so 5s were kept coming at me from all over the place. And then whilst I was at the World Expo, I'd come across this wonderful scientist, Carl Joran Hedane. And he had come up, he'd saying, we're shifting to a kind of quantum mechanical world where we're going to be doing things fabulously efficiently. We're going to make things without defects. We're going to make things in an instant, without massive noise, without massive weights and inventories. We're going to have information processing that's so efficient that you just say a couple of words and the answer comes to you. You don't have to search through the world's libraries. We're going to do things without waste, which is what I got involved in. And eventually he regarded the highest point of this zero, what he called the zero ladder, as having a world in which there was zero conflict. You can't have a truly productive, efficient, effective world while there's conflict and fighting. So he wanted world peace. That was pretty cool. Right. And then so I sort of wrote this up and left it there. Didn't know what to do with it. One night I was staying at a friend's house in London, and he'd got Sky TV, right? 1 million channels. And I quickly discovered that even with 1,000 or however many channels it is, it's mostly all rubbish, right? So I was clicking through the channels and I heard a voice, and it was unmistakably David Attenborough. And he was saying, the 5 causes of climate breakdown, right? And I thought, it's going to match. It's going to match. This is the 5 fundamentals gone wrong, right? It's got to match. So I stopped. I got out a piece of paper. I started writing it up, and it was David Attenborough on one of the lectures in the series, State of the Planet. 5 causes of climate breakdown. 1, habitat destruction. Great. 2, alien species, the wrong species being introduced in places. Pollution, islandization, chopping up habitats so they're no longer connected. And finally, overharvesting. Well, it didn't take me a moment. Habitat destruction is the destruction of stability. The introduction of alien species is a kind of bastardization of adaptability. It's bringing in the wrong adaptations for a place. Pollution is purification gone wrong. The system's not able to purify. You're damaging it too fast. Islandization is the breakdown of integration. And finally, over-harvesting is preventing growth mechanisms from working properly. Wow. This was like a really moving moment for me, because I could see that all that I'd been doing related to what was going wrong with the planet, and that by somehow enlivening these fundamentals of progress, we could put things right. And what I didn't realize, what I didn't know is where these fundamentals of progress had come from. And they were actually developed while scientific research was being done on the effects of meditation. And they were looking for a way of kind of classifying them. And they're basically saying, when people meditate, it produces increased mental stability. It creates stability in relationships and so on. So these fundamentals of progress were developed empirically while researching on meditation. So kind of by implication, if you can bring people's minds, improve stability and so on in our minds, then we will stop perversely wrong, damaged behaviors in the environment. So, you know, I put together loads of diagrams, I've got a dozen diagrams like this where I put them all together and sit there and go, wow. And I also I realized that Maharishi, that these could be related to technologies that Maharishi had brought out, which was what increases stability in the mind was meditation. What was increasing adaptability was groups practicing meditation together. Purification, he was reviving Ayurveda, so that's about purifying the body. Integration, he was looking at the integration of mankind with the cosmos as a form of Vedic astrology, which is rather more than fortune telling. And finally, growth, Stapatya Veda, it's an architectural system. It's how you can grow anything. It's not just about housing and settlements. It's actually how you make a cell, how you make an atom, how you make a universe. So there are Vedic technologies that relate to these fundamentals of progress. And interestingly enough, this was the order that Maharishi had brought them out. So there was even a sequence. And then some years later, I came to Bristol and I was wanting to map out this diagram I've added in. I made it in 2011, which is why it stops at 2011 there. Is that right? Yeah. And it's like my life. And I would do something for a while and then I'd get really good at it for a few years. And I realized this is the same color coding, right? That this is me, this is my personal version of the fundamentals of progress, or my personal Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And my career maps onto it. I'd spent 20 years in computing, 10 in mainframes, and then 10 in Silicon Valley. At the precise point that Microsoft Office came out and you could have a Macintosh, you could have your own computer, and I didn't need to work for people who had computers anymore. That's when I came back and I became kind of a management consultant as the internet was coming out, and then started to experience the benefits of these supercomputers, which started disappearing inside the things that they were replacing, right? You get a phone with a computer in it, but it's got a camera and jeepers, what else? And the first version of this I did in 2011, just before Steve Jobs died. So I put him ascending to the iCloud in a sort of final coda on this diagram. And then what I was really drawing that for was because I was saying there's a parallel between the IT revolution and the solar revolution. There's a time when it's kind of uphill work, like working for people with computers. But there's so initially solar panels were only used on satellites because they cost so much to make. But there came a time when solar energy was as cheap as the energy system that it was replacing. And that was around 2011. It takes a while for people to notice, but I added in, I thought there was like as with a personal computer, as with an iPhone, it's not just a computer anymore, it's a camera, it's a GPS. And I was saying there are other things that create a solar ecosystem, and it's smart grids and storage and electric cars and all the rest of it. And all well and good. Fast forward to now, and I've got it down to 5 fundamentals of creating 100% renewable energy. So this is the point. I didn't publish anything that I'd done, didn't show it to anybody, because I didn't think that it, as a pure theory, it's any use whatsoever, unless it has some real application. And so I wanted to see if it applied in my work. So the solar energy work that I've been doing is based on this theory, but I don't lay it on anybody at all. And now, you know, sorry, what I've been suggesting, sorry, I want to go back one. That's written up very nicely. What my idea is written up very nicely in this book by Chris Goodall. And he's basically saying, this is what we need to do to create a zero carbon future. And one important point to note is that these changes happen incredibly fast. One of the faults with theories of evolution is, you know, where's the, you know, the missing link? You know, there's no evidence of anything between that stage and this stage, you know, no fossil record. And I'm saying these transitions from one stage to another are very, very quick. They happen in decades or less, you know, less time than it takes for a meteorite to destroy the dinosaurs. But this change is happening the same. So this looks like a straight line, but the left-hand scale is logarithmic. So it's times 10, times 10, times 10, times 10. So solar energy has been growing steadily at a fantastic rate. We can just extend the line if we want. And the reason I've stopped at 2032 is because that's when it reaches the line that is world total electricity consumption, or a year later, no more, world total energy consumption in 2032. So you have governments meeting and saying we've got to decarbonize by 2050. And I'm saying, you don't know nothing. Us techie nerds are going to have done the whole job by 2030, whether you like it or not, because we're developing technologies that are going to make, so whether you're upset with democracy working or not working, our technocracy is delivering the changes that we need. And so this is the very latest thing, is there is a wonderful online book called Rethinking Humanity, which is talking about 5 foundational sector disruptions. So skip that. Only one of which is energy, and they're saying that there is a wonderful online book called Rethinking Humanity, which is talking about 5 foundational sectors. Sorry, for some reason Siri just started picking up on what I was saying. Bless him, and I got him set to an Indian voice just for the fun of it. So Rethinking Humanity is talking about exponential changes in energy, transport, food, communication, and materials to the point where they're going to be cheaper, less wasteful, and we end up with a very different planet. And I'm not sure about whether they do line up like this, but I'm thinking it's 5 things. So finally, we reach the point where we're in transition. And so summing it up in terms of consciousness, spirit, the self, starts to observe itself and becomes intellect and mind. This manifests as space-time, subtle energy, gross energy, subtle matter, gross matter. And we find ourselves as humans on the surface of this sphere, right? We've been born, we're thrown up on the surface of a material universe, not understanding the deeper structure. But this is really how creation has worked. And this is the Indian model of nature, but it matches exactly the Western model of nature. And I say all creation is from consciousness manifesting as the material, and all development is by diving back into this from the surface to the core, so that we tap into our creativity, our deeper intelligence, spirit, consciousness. And that's all of evolution. So there's a wonderful cosmic cycle of creation and evolution, which is summed up in the Rig Veda as curving back on myself, my true nature, spirit. I create again and again. Full stop, end of paragraph. Questions?
Gasps of amazement is better.
Hi, Jenny. You can all unmute yourselves and say this is insane or
I
whatever.
know. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's fantastic.
The only thing that worries me about it all is we're talking about information, and information can be controlled. And what we need is the truth, not just one person's information being imposed on us. And how do you think within your model we are going to address that when the need is for more people to be educated so that that can't happen and decide for themselves, not be told?
It's beautiful. Knowledge exists on all of the levels in that last diagram. And it's actually, you may have heard of and not necessarily really understood people talking about the Akashic record. In the Indian system, there is a phrase, Ritambara Pragyan, and it's intellect, it's knowledge that knows only truth, right? And it's, as you, in an energy system, something can be very excited and energetic and chaotic. And as it settles down, it reaches a ground state. And the unified field, spirit, is also known as the vacuum state in physics. If you understand it from as a chemist or a physicist, you understand that the unified field is a state of zero entropy. There is no disorder in it. It cannot even know untruth. It only knows truth. It only is truth. And there's an Indian saying, Satyam eva jayati, Satyam eva jayati, truth alone triumphs. And the point is, we are living on this chaotic surface. And as we start to bring our minds to more and more coherent levels through the mind naturally settling, through peak experience, through meditation, the mind is being brought to a state that is increasingly coherent, increasingly truthful, increasingly only capable of perceiving and comprehending truth. So basically, it's by developing people's refined thinking levels, both as individuals and in groups. But we obviously are seeing, it does not work to have a president in the free world who is incapable of speaking the truth. He is only capable of saying things that appeal to his cronies, that wind his crowd up. But we now perceive that they might just be in a slight minority. And we hope that will continue to be the case from here on in. Anne?
Yeah, just a couple of other points I wanted to make, but just leading on from what you've just been saying, I think it's a credit to America's democracy system that they have been able to elect or not elect Trump. So let's let them take credit for their democracy. Two other things going on at the moment that I just want to bring into the discussion. One is, I don't know if people have had the opportunity to listen to the Wreath lectures and Mark Carney, who is, and if you haven't, then I would recommend it. He is talking about values in the financial system. Very significant area of that he's talking about. And basically he's saying, we get the system we value. And he's talking about the way that the financial system has just valued, making lots and lots more money. And David, in your early career, you can probably relate to that. And we need to change it. Yeah. And the other significant author that I think is interesting here is, name's just gone out my head. sorry, it's one of those amnesia moments. He's been writing about the collapse of systems and the way in which the fact that the markets are driven just by making money creates something where it's sort of like mining companies just go in, take as much as they can out of the soil, no thought of sustainability, and they destroy destroy the environment. Fishing has been the same. Lots of things have been like that. He's then gone on to write Guns, Germs and Steel, and somebody will know his name, and I just can't.
Okay, so there's a lot of people thinking that way, of course. I was thinking when you were saying, are you talking about Jem Bendell and his deep adaptation, or latest book I've got, The Uninhabitable Earth, which tells it about as bad as it could. And, you know, there's as many people writing about the solutions, you know, Kate Rayworth with Donut Economics, which...
I'll Google the title and it will come back to me.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, it's just one of those moments when you just can't get a name, and I keep getting more of them. So, but yeah, that it's just those developments that are going alongside, and without those developments and changes in the way our financial and markets are driven, that's what we need to kind of change. We need to change our values, what humanity values.
Well, Bristol is running a citizens' assembly. It's in the process of running a citizens' assembly at the moment, and has already done a survey. And the aim is actually post-COVID recovery, not so much as climate change, but in a survey of the people of Bristol, so over 7,000 people responded, and people want, you know, fairer sharing, end to homelessness, work for young people, all the rest of it. You know, a complete gear shift to more compassionate community values. Ray.
At the moment, Western governments are doing what the Romans used to do. The Western powerful governments are doing what the Romans used to do, which history called bread and circuses. And in this case, at the moment, it's giving the poor and the slightly educated food and entertainment. Entertainment is your television, where you say it has thousands and thousands of channels. People are sitting and consuming on the internet as well. They are not being encouraged to think. They are certainly not being encouraged to meditate, because, you know, that would be to them nearly a crime that the people that you're actually populace woke up and actually started to take it upon themselves to be part of the solution.
Yeah, exactly. So, one moment, Stephen. Exactly right. And the Rethinking Humanity report is actually a study of past civilizations and how they collapse and how new civilizations emerge. And often you have an interregnum, a dark age between, or you have a very bloody transfer, as when Mongol hordes took over vast swathes of the earth and wiped out 10% of the earth's population in so doing. But the thesis of Rethinking Humanity is that we are actually in the dark age now. This is the dark age, you know, playing golf while Capitol Hill burns. And that this generation can emerge into a new civilization. And so it's very well worth reading Rethinking Humanity from precisely the perspective that you're talking about, Ray. Stephen.
Well, the meditation I did this morning told me I should try to liberate myself from my ideology, but hasn't worked yet. And my ideology, but one of them is Quakerism. So I was straining to stretch Quaker principles to your 5. Well, unfortunately, at the moment we only have 4. peace, equality, truth, and simplicity. But then we are trying, many of us want to add a fifth, which is sustainability. But I haven't been able to map them one-to-one to your 5. But the latter part of the beginning of the discussion period, truth came out as terribly important at all levels of development. And I've often thought, well, advice 1 talks about love and truth. Well, love is obviously because of our Christian roots, but I've often wondered why truth is given quite that rating of one of the top 2 values that Quakers apparently value, having it in advice 1. So that does tie in, though, with the sense of truth, which doesn't just mean not telling lies. It means things being absolutely right and pure and as they should be. So that's just a couple of observations on your very brilliant exposition. And you ought to write a book about it so we have it all under one cover.
Well, at some point, I have a friend. First of all, it takes time and money. It takes time to write. You need money to have the freedom to do it, and it's no use having a theory. I've watched these gurus like Stephen Covey and Tom Peters and others who make an observation about something, and they write it up. And suddenly they're thrust into a spotlight and they become a guru without necessarily being an exponent of what they write about. It wasn't so much wanting to become an exponent, but I was quite keen to see if the theory did work in practice. And in my my little map of my 5 stages so far, the next stage would be when I would write this up. I feel it's sort of shifting to a mental level. But going back to that, similarly, you can look at Islam. There's 5 pillars of Islam, and they map very nicely. And if you wander into a little bit further east, you'll find that some of the systems that really understand consciousness have 8 levels. So you have the 8-fold path, and you have these 5 elements. In China, they have the 5 elements, but they also have yin, yang, and the Tao. So they've got 5 plus 3. So it's quite, and there's a Western system that's nearly there with 8 elements, and that's called spiral dynamics. So it's a very integrated approach to development. And it has 5 basic levels, and then it talks about transpersonal levels emerging. So that fits very nicely. So I kind of like that. I'm trying not to be blinkered to the possibility that there are other models that don't fit this. But so far I've been pretty lucky. Patsy, did you have? Are you just,
I'm a bit of a Martha. I apologise for that. I'm afraid what my mind was on at that moment was how important it was to make sure that people know we'll be getting the details of the Christmas talks in time. I'm so ashamed. I am sorry. I have been absolutely enthralled throughout, David. I have really. I've made loads of notes, which I shall be studying later on.
Ditto.
But I'm sorry, but I don't really have a question. So I apologize.
well, thank you for that, because I mean it's true. Our minds shift focus to what's more charming and what's more useful, and sometimes what's more urgent. What's more. What have I got to do now? We have to have one eye on. Oh, what have I got to do next, and all the rest of it.
Yes,
Development systems are no use unless they're practical, and I found, having deliberately been looking for sort of development systems and taken them on board as much as I could, and taught Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People 13 times at Unilever. It's really useful to be ripped through integrative development processes, because it cultures the mind. It helps it work more effectively. And I think that, you know, so some attention to what are the processes that really deliver human evolution, you know, my evolution and our evolution, and favoring those processes. I think it's really important.
Okay.
Jenny.
Do you actually think that life is a journey, I feel, and I learn a lot about one thing, and then suddenly another door will open and I move on, and it's accumulating of knowledge, but accumulating of people as well. Each person I meet, I find, leaves their mark on me in some way or other, most of them for good reasons. And I feel lots of human beings should be like that, but they're not, because they are surrounded by the razzmatazz of this modern world. And that worries me.
Like I said, you know, we find us, we're born on the surface of a material planet, and it all looks very material to many of us, and we're traumatized through experiences. I mean, you know, your life started out during a world war with bombing and all the rest of it, right? And you know, we can't ignore that affects us. There's a wonderful intelligence in our body sometimes in taking traumatic experience and encapsulating it because you can't handle it. In Israel, they recognized they had a lot of traumatized people, and there was a move to help people move through that with the right kind of counseling and therapy. And what happened was the suicide rate went up because it was surfacing issues that people couldn't handle. So, you know, dealing with trauma and acknowledging where it is. I mean, we can't have this conversation without being mindful that Bristol was at one time the world's largest slave port and is now the center for arms procurement and design in the United Kingdom.
Yes.
You know, so we've got a very dark material shadow.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
One of the things that I also think about, you talking about the war, we actually had prisoners, German prisoners, that were working on the land, and we treated them like ordinary human beings. And when I went and lived in Germany for nearly 4 years, some of the women were talking, and we were talking about what was happening in Germany during the war, and the children being hungry and not being able to come out of the cellars. And I'm sure the links there have made me really sure that I am not for violence in any way whatsoever. And I think you're sent messages sometimes, and they open a door and you think, that's the bit I'm going to change in my life. I'm going to move on in another way. I don't know whether other friends feel the same.
Blessed are the peacemakers, and all those other beatitudes from the Sermon of the Mount.
Look, it's time we thought of closing now. David, do you want to say any final words before we talk about next week?
I feel that in this conversation we've covered a lot of final words. This is I've been sitting on this material for years. I've never done a presentation on this. This is the first ever.
Really?
So I'd like to thank you, Stephen, and Patsy for creating the forum that's allowed me to try these ideas out at the time that I think is right. You know, just when this Rethinking Humanity report comes out, just as Bristol's thinking how to recover post-COVID. So the one last thing I would say is that the Maharishi, the teacher from whom I learnt meditation, talked about filling the world with love. He asked what his mission was. I will fill the world with love and I will create heaven on earth. And the creating heaven on earth comes from having large groups of people meditating together, creating coherence in collective consciousness. The bad news is that at the junction point between disorder and order, say water as it becomes ice or water vapor as it becomes water, the junction point is kind of a little bit crazy. There's turbulence at the phase change.
Yeah.
And my fellow meditation practitioners and teachers who are aware of this have been looking forward with eagerness and trepidation to this phase change, because we know we won't, that the phase change is inevitable. We have to go through it to get to a different age. The tank regiment's slogan was "through mud and blood to the green fields beyond." Well, there isn't anybody I know who is a teacher of transcendental meditation who does not think that we are in the phase change right now. So the good news is that, you know, if you can stay mounted, hold on to your horse, we should be emerging into a more coherent, more caring future for everyone, rather than just a few. But at the moment, you know, it's inevitable. At the point where you've only just turned, the balance is very delicate. And, you know, the number of people voting for the thing you don't want is almost as many as the number of people, or more than the people voting for the thing that you do want. But, you know, from 4 years ago to today might be seen by some as an improvement in the right direction. And let's work together for more of it.
Well, I won't say let's fight together, because we've had enough military illusions.
Yeah.
Can we just do some militaristic planning for 25th of December? Patsy, you're going to tell us what you've got in mind for that.
We need to go. Oh, just yeah. We need to go to Christopher. It's actually from the 24th. We're going to be. Christopher, you take over. Look.
Right. Yeah. So it's 2:30 every afternoon from Christmas Eve till Saturday the 2nd of January inclusive. Some of the things are madder than others. Ray's introducing some, I'm introducing some, and Patsy's introducing some. Now, the reason it hasn't been circulated so far is I'm not good with words. And also, I was trying to set up a recurring meeting on Zoom, and it doesn't seem to want to let me. So,
well, I can do that. I can do that, and you're paying for it.
Right. Okay. Right. Well, I'll have a. Do you want to stay on, Stephen, and then we'll sort that out, and then I can finish typing up the list and just send it. Who is it? Rosalind who can get it. Rosalind can get it circulated to.
Two technical points. One, a Zoom meeting is automatically recurring. If people join at any time, you think you set it up for a time, but you don't. They just work. And the other point is that over Christmas, Zoom are making all meetings of unlimited length. So even people who don't have a Zoom account will be able to have extended meetings with their families. And it would be good to let people know that. That's a very sweet thing that they're doing.
Can bloody afford it.
Oh, lovely.
So I've got the list here. I mean, do you want me to run through the titles without, you know?
Yes, please.
So
yes, please.
But don't, you know, and then you can get in touch if you haven't received them in writing. Right, what are we planning to do over the holiday? Why Quakers don't celebrate Christmas? Is it okay for Quakers to take up boxing? Share a favorite poem, general knowledge quiz. Are you surviving the holiday? Share favorite passages from Quaker Faith and Practice. Telling others about books that have inspired us. Favorite foods. And what do we want for the new year? So.
Wow.
Sounds good.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay.
On Christmas.
So,
thank you very much.
Sounds good.
Thank you, David. Wonderful. We're very grateful.
Right. So Stephen stays on with me. Yeah.
I
Thank
stay
you,
on with
David. Thank you.
Yeah.
Everybody. Bye.
Thank you, David.
Bye.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Yeah.
Goodbye,
Thank you,
everybody.
thank you,
Goodbye,
thank you.
Julia.
Very inspiring.
Bye.
Thank you.
Good
Yes,
end.
Yeah.
thank
Yeah. Really great, David.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
thank you, thank you.
Oh,
Thank you,
Rosie.
thank you, thank you. Well,
Should I stay on as well?
We'll leave,
Yes, you could do.
leave you happy people together. See ya.
Thank you.